Well, Big Australia keeps getting bigger. There are fresh fears that the Albanese government will miss its targets to bring down migration in a bid to ease the housing crisis. Former Immigration Department Deputy Secretary Abul Rizvi has told the Daily Telegraph Treasury boffins have overestimated how many student visa holders will leave the country over coming years, something that could keep net migration rates at record highs. Joining me now is One Nation Chief James Ashby and Sky News contributor James Bolt. Hi to you both. Thank you so much for joining me. James Bolt, we'll start with you. Nobody ever voted for a big Australia, yet here we are. And I truly think that this has become an acute vote-driving issue because we are in a housing crisis and it's pushed up inflation. Where do we put everyone?
Yeah, it's good politics for Peter Dutton to be attacking on this because people are very uncomfortable with the levels of migration. 48% of people think it's too high, 10% is too low. So it's good for Peter Dutton to be pushing that. The issue for me is if he's out there saying the housing crisis is due to migration, I'll get in, I'll bring down migration, I'm going to solve that. The housing crisis is so much more complicated than how many people are coming in. I think that's a pretty minuscule way of looking at it. The issue is, and it takes a lot of forms, I mean, obviously James Ashby in Queensland where the homelessness situation is so strong. But here in Sydney, the problem is so many people who want to buy their first homes, the only first homes that are available to them are ones that are in places they don't want to live. So Peter Dutton, he needs to start also thinking, how can I bring down the regulation costs on businesses? How can I keep people, how is the most in-demand industry in Australia facing liquidisation crises? I think we just need to look at also why the housing supply is so small. How come we can't build houses? How come we can't build them in inner city areas? And what are the regulations that would need to be repealed through there rather than just framing it as there's too many migrants coming in?
Look, what I will say is migration was not front and centre at the last election, and from both sides. Neither side had a proper policy to deal with it, and here we are. James Ashby, the other thing is that migration is really propping up our economy, isn't it? It's a Ponzi scheme because without it, we'd be in a recession.
Well, this has been the issue. It's certainly been a One Nation policy since we had 4 members of Parliament elected back in 2016, and we haven't stopped on this. This has been a culmination of a Labor and LNP issue. Because no matter which political party you turn to, the 2 major parties have been responsible for large immigration intake. The Coalition have been responsible for a yearly intake of around 200 to 220,000. Under this Labor government, that has more than doubled in their term in just over 2 years. So we're really dealing with a major issue where they are propping up GDP and keeping our economy alive by bringing in people into the country. But we all know what that consequence is. We're finding it difficult to get into houses. This is a government that says, oh, we're only bringing in the trained, skilled migrants. What a load of baloney, and we all know it. There's not a surplus of builders or nurses or doctors. There's plenty of surplus when it comes to taxi drivers and accountants and engineers, but not the people we need in this country. We've got to pull back on the immigration and stop lying to the Australian public. We know what's going on, and it's been caused by the 2 major parties.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. As I said, it was not front and centre at the last election. It needs to be front and centre this time. There's a lot of problems. Now, look, the Bruce Highway in Queensland will receive billions in funding regardless of the federal election outcome after Peter Dutton declared he would match the government's $7.2 billion in funding to finally bring that deadly stretch of road up to modern safety standards. Yet a coalition government would also ban the CFMEU from all future highway projects. James Bolt, is that a fair call? Back the funding but boot the CFMEU at the same time?
Yeah, well, the less things the CFMEU are involved with, the better. And look, roads, you can tell it's an election's coming up when politicians pretend to care about regional roads. And look, the Bruce Highway does need to be fixed. It is very important for people. And as a libertarian, roads are one of the few things that I'm like, yes, the government does need to really focus on. The issue for me is we're in an inflation crisis and government spending is a huge part of that. And now we're not even in an election campaign and the funding promises, they're already out the door. So I hope it's not just a precursor for 5 months of we're going to spend on this, we're going to spend on that, we're going to spend on this. The other thing for me is when Labor announces this, and what infuriates me about Labor doing this, and they're not the only government that does this, is that they have been in charge for 3 years. The business case for improving the Bruce Highway has been there for every single day of those 3 years. But now that we're in an election campaign, suddenly, Labor, they need to do this. I hope the opposition gets out of the way. If they were serious about it, if they really wanted to help regional Australians, and they not would have only done it 3 years ago, they would at least start it today.
That was my exact thoughts. If it was so dangerous and deadly as they keep telling us, why wasn't this done years ago? It should have been fixed years ago. James Ashby, this is happening in your home state. Do you support this funding?
Oh, look, I'm not going to congratulate either side for this, because it's an obligation of government to look after roads. And this isn't a decaying Bruce Highway over the last 2 years under this government. It's been decaying for decades now under both Labor and the Liberal coalition here. And I hate banging on about this. I only drove back from Brisbane this morning and I did the whole Bruce Highway. It is in very poor shape. When you get north of Gympie, it really deteriorates. We're a country that consumes over 42 million litres of fuel every single day, of which most of that has an excise tax of 55 cents attached to it. 50 cents in excise, 10% then attached to it in GST. Come on, there's been plenty of money applied to, collected certainly by the federal government and state government for that matter in GST, that has not been put towards the upkeep of not just the Bruce Highway, but all regional roads that lead to some of the most productive country, whether it be mining or agricultural sectors of this state. So, no, I won't congratulate either side. You should have done this a long time ago. You should have committed the money. And Australians, don't fall for this crap. It's happening, just months out from an election. We're not idiots.
No, how convenient, you're right. Now, Labor is at it again with its green fantasies. It's putting $50 million towards subsidising electric vehicle loans. Forget this. Farmers and truckers in a push to decarbonise key industries. Under the scheme, an eligible borrower paying off a loan on a $60,000 EV could save $1,700 in interest over 5 years. James Bolt, I wonder how excited the farmers are to drive that Tesla on the farm, drive it through the paddocks. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I can see the EV tractor getting 5 metres into a paddock and then needing 9 hours to recharge.
Exactly.
But the issue, no one's going to take this up, and I hope they don't, because here's what a subsidy is. It doesn't decrease the cost of the car. It just decreases the cost one person pays for the car, and the other costs are spread out to everyone. So if you're a farmer and you don't want an EV, bad luck, you're still paying for someone else's EV. What this Labor government does is bring in new regulations on cars that we do want to up their prices, then subsidise or make everyone pay for cars we don't want to lower the prices of cars that no one's buying. With leadership like that, I wonder how we're in an economic crisis.
Yeah, exactly. You wonder, right? And James Ashby, the other thing is aside from the ridiculous optics of this whole proposal, it's only $1,700 over 5 years. What sort of an incentive is that?
Well, it won't encourage any regional person, particularly farmers, to get into this. Let me paint the picture for you. The people who buy electric vehicles are people that shop at Louis Vuitton and have designer dogs. We're not talking about people with Kelpies and who shop at Kmart and Woolworths here. We're talking about the people in the upper echelons. Now, I know in 2017 we lost our car industry here in Australia. We never lost the luxury car tax, I might just add, that was applied to try and keep that industry alive. What I've discovered is they've been collecting for the last 7 years that luxury car tax. Was supposed to prop up Australian manufacturing, as I say. It's now going to go to propping up Chinese electric vehicle manufacturing. That's who's going to get the subsidy. And it's just, again, a transfer of wealth overseas. Again, I might just point out, people in the West have got often single strings of power coming down their streets. If you want to recharge a car or better still, a loader or anything for a farm, you're going to need at least 3-phase to be able to charge it up. And I say you've got Buckleys when you're on a farm.
Yeah, and also the fact that we just simply do not have the infrastructure available at all in this country to power any of these trucks for farmers or these EVs. It's just ridiculous. James Ashby, James Bolt, really good to speak with you both. Thank you so much for joining me on the show this evening.